Now I'm curious, does my human anxiety not make my dog's anxiety worse? I've been told so multiple times, and I always feel so bad because my PMS gives me crazy anxiety and panic out of nowhere. The short answer is no. Your anxiety did not create your dog's anxiety. But there's a longer answer and a lot of nuance, and I want to talk about it. So this notion that our anxiety is creating reactivity or behavior problems in our dogs is a very common trope. You will especially find this in balance training circles or compulsion-focused training circles, and that's because those philosophies tend to be misogynistic and ableist. In the video this comment was left on, I'm talking about my crossover from balance training from a particular brand of balance training called leadership training, where I also was taught and believed and taught other people that we needed to be balanced. We needed to have calm energy. And that also came along with a certain posture and a certain tone and a certain way of handling the leash. And it was connected to these really nebulous, poorly defined notions of like respect and leadership. And it sounds really true, especially if you're already feeling a certain kind of way about having totally normal human emotions. But listen to all of the things that I just said there. Because even in that balance training philosophy of like leadership, by the end of that, I wasn't just talking about emotions. I was also talking about our behavior. I was talking about the way that we responded and were in relationship to our dogs. Not to mention all of the things happening outside of what's going on with me, the human. What I find more often than not is that when we as humans are elevated, when we are aroused, when we are stressed, whether that's because we're like super excited or we're anxious or we're frustrated or we're feeling sick or there's been some physical shift in our body, our behavior changes too. And sometimes our behavior in those moments can impact our dog's emotions and behavior. So if I see another dog and that makes me feel really anxious because my dog is dog reactive, first of all, gorgeous nervous system response, beautiful. I want my nervous system to be alert and aware when there's a potentially dangerous situation. I'm always much more worried about people whose nervous system doesn't seem to be alerting them to danger once we have identified that historically this could be an unsafe situation. But if when I get anxious, I suddenly tense up on the leash or I start yelling at my dog or I in some way behave in a way that restricts my dog's agency, adds to their stress, scares them, then yeah, that could have a huge impact on my dog's behavior. In those cases, it's still usually not what's causing the issue. Anxiety disorders in dogs come from a myriad of places, which can include genetics, early life experiences to include experiences like in utero, maternal care after birth, litter size, birth order. We're looking at epigenetics. We're looking at the match between the socialization period and the current environment. We're looking at learning history, which is, can include their interactions with us, but is so much more broad than that. We're looking at how they feel physically in their body. We're looking at what's happening developmentally. We're looking at their sleep, their nutrition, their overall health. So there are a ton of factors that go into a dog developing an anxiety disorder, so much beyond just our human emotions. So sometimes when we are elevated, we may display behaviors that impact how our dog feels. Absolutely. I find that is much more powerful than just simply us feeling the emotion, causing our dog to also like mirror that emotion. Some things to consider. Dogs seem to have domesticated themselves. They were like, people. And we ended up here. If dogs being present for the full range of human emotions was detrimental to them to that degree, we would probably not be here. Another thought, psychiatric service dogs exist. If it was as simple as human feels anxiety, dog gets anxiety, psychiatric service dogs wouldn't work out. Dogs gather a lot of information. Speaking of service dogs, they can sniff out cancer. They can detect a seizure coming on. It makes total sense that they could smell an increase in our stress hormones. And they're very perceptive. They're going to notice shifts in our body language and our behavior. And depending on the individual dog, especially with, again, the context of all of those other pieces that make up the individual dog, Sometimes our dogs do create associations. I have a dissociative disorder. When I dissociate, my little stranger danger kiddo with an anxiety disorder will come up and paw at me. I didn't teach her to do that. She's not a little service dog in training. It stresses her out. She's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting differently? I didn't cause her anxiety disorder. Poor genetics and a really traumatic early environment caused her anxiety disorder. And I think that's really helpful to understand because it's a lot more empowering. If we recognize that certain shifts in us, most often certain behaviors in us, can impact how our dog is feeling, then we can just treat that like another trigger. We can counter condition it. We can show them how to cope with it. We can teach them that it's not a scary thing. And that's much easier than saying, I'm going to try to be a healthy person who also has zero emotions or only feels positive emotions and will remain neutral and stoic for my dog always. So to all the pet parents out there struggling with anxiety or struggling with their own nervous system dysregulation or struggling with their own trauma, you're doing an excellent job. And you don't deserve to feel any shame or guilt around experiencing the full spectrum of the human experience.